April 1775, a British vessel speeds across the Atlantic Ocean, carrying urgent instructions from London to the American colonies. Britain's government, led by Prime Minister Lord North, has approved a final proposal intended to calm the growing crisis. Known as a conciliatory resolution, it is meant to prevent open war. But the journey takes weeks. By the time the message reaches America, events have already overtaken diplomacy. Armed conflict has erupted at Lexington and Concord. Blood has been spilled. The colonies and the British Empire are now at war. When the resolution finally arrives, it is rejected outright by colonial leaders and the Continental Congress. The proposal does not address their core demands. Parliament still claims authority over colonial taxation, a principle many Americans refuse to accept. Colonial leaders respond with a long list of grievances: harsh laws, unfair courts, and abuses of authority. Trust between Britain and the colonies has collapsed. The conflict begins to intensify. By June 1775, British forces in America are concentrated in Boston. General Thomas Gage commands around 6,000 professional soldiers. However, he finds himself surrounded by nearly 15,000 colonial militia. These men lack formal training and proper equipment, but they're motivated and determined. The American militia occupy high ground overlooking the city. From these positions, they threaten British control of Boston and its harbor. Gage realizes that allowing the rebels to hold these positions is dangerous. He decides to drive them out. British forces prepare to attack the colonial defenses. The objective is to capture elevated positions overlooking the battlefield. British commanders believe their professional soldiers will easily defeat the poorly trained militia. When the attack begins, British troops advance with discipline and confidence. But the American defenders are well positioned behind defensive works. As British soldiers approach, the militia unleash devastating musket fire at close range. The British suffer heavy losses. Officers attempt to reorganize their troops and launch additional assaults. Each time they face fierce resistance. Colonial soldiers, led by determined officers, refuse to break. Eventually, the Americans begin to run out of ammunition. Without bullets, they cannot continue resisting. British troops launch another assault, this time using bayonets. Unable to defend themselves effectively, the Americans are forced to retreat. The British capture the battlefield, but their victory comes at a terrible cost. Hundreds of British soldiers lie dead or wounded. The Americans have suffered fewer casualties, but lost valuable leaders. Despite their defeat, the colonial militia have proven they can stand against Britain's professional army. The battle has profound consequences. For the Americans, it strengthens morale. They now believe independence may be possible. For the British, it is a warning. The rebellion will not be easily suppressed. Across the colonies, British authority begins to weaken. Royal officials flee their positions as revolutionary governments emerge. Military installations fall into American hands with little resistance. Supplies, weapons, and strategic locations are seized. Despite the growing conflict, some still hope for peace. Moderate leaders believe reconciliation with Britain is possible. They appeal directly to King George III, expressing loyalty and requesting a peaceful settlement. This appeal becomes known as the Olive Branch Petition. It represents one final attempt to avoid complete separation from Britain. But the petition arrives too late. News of the fighting has already reached London. British leaders interpret colonial actions as open rebellion. The king declares the colonies in revolt and prepares to use military force to restore control. Meanwhile, the Continental Congress appoints George Washington as Commander-in-Chief of the American forces. Washington arrives at the Army's encampment near Boston to assume command. He finds the army in poor condition. Many soldiers lack proper weapons and supplies. Discipline is weak. The camp is disorganized. Disease threatens the army's survival. Washington begins imposing order. He introduces discipline, improves organization, and strengthens leadership. Harsh punishments are introduced for desertion and misconduct. Efforts are made to improve training and readiness. Washington also faces serious supply shortages. Ammunition is scarce. Equipment is limited. Despite these challenges, he prepares the army to resist British forces. The British face difficulties of their own. Their army depends on supplies shipped across the Atlantic. These supply lines are vulnerable to disruption. Food shortages and disease weaken their position. As the standoff continues, the conflict spreads to other colonies. British officials attempt to rally loyal supporters. In some regions, enslaved people are offered freedom if they join British forces. This strategy creates fear and division among colonial society. Meanwhile, American forces continue strengthening their position. They capture weapons and supplies wherever possible. Their determination grows stronger as hopes for reconciliation fade. Winter arrives, bringing new hardships. Cold weather, hunger, and expiring enlistments reduce the size of Washington's army. Many soldiers leave, believing the cause is lost. Washington faces a crisis. His army shrinks dramatically. British forces remain powerful and well supplied. The future of the American rebellion hangs in the balance. Then news arrives that changes everything. King George III has formally declared the colonies in rebellion. He promises to send overwhelming military force to crush resistance. His words destroy any remaining hope of peace. For many Americans, this moment marks a turning point. They no longer seek compromise. They now believe independence is the only path forward. The struggle has become more than a protest. It is now a war for freedom, survival, and the creation of a new nation. Both sides prepare for a long and brutal conflict. The outcome remains uncertain. But one thing is clear. The bonds between Britain and its American colonies have been broken, perhaps forever.